Cultivating Pleasant Places. I'm Brenda Dillon, and today I wanted to show you how we approach books in our homeschooling. We definitely do a literature-based type of education. Growing up, I loved reading, I loved books, and that is my number 2 goal for my children, is that they would love books and be readers when they graduate. My first goal is for them to read the Bible and have a relationship with God, and I get to do both of those at home, which is wonderful. But I thought it might be helpful to show you some of the books we're reading and to explain how we read, because it's a little bit different. When I grew up, and just my whole life, I have been what I call a channel surfing reader. So I never read a book from start to finish. I don't know if it's that I don't have the attention span for it or what, but I had this habit of I would read one chapter from a book and then, or 2 or 3 with the intention of getting through it. And then a new book would come along that was exciting and interesting, and I'd pick that up and read it. And then as an adult, I found it was just useful to have a book in every room of the house. And so I have the car book and the bath book and the book in my purse for waiting rooms, and every room just has stacks of books, and I pick up whichever one is closest. And everyone kind of laughed at me and said, that's a funny little quirk you have there, Brenda Dillon. How do you keep track of the books? But for me, it's just like channel surfing through TV shows, or back when you had to wait a week to see the next episode of a TV show. Nobody said, how do you keep track of what's going on in your favorite television show? You would just remember from one week to the next, oh, that's right, that character is getting married. Oh, how is that conflict going to be resolved? And that's just what I do with books. I have them stored away, and when I pull one out, I think, oh, yes, this is what's happening with this character. I wonder what will be the next development. And so I was thrilled. We had already started Charlotte Mason homeschooling. We use Ambleside Online, and if you go there, you can see the lists of books they have for each year. But part of Charlotte Mason's approach to schooling is channel surfing reading. So a child will read one chapter in a book and narrate it back to you, or at the younger ages, up until about 4th grade, I'm usually reading the books to the kids, not because they can't read in 4th grade, but all of our books tend to be at a slightly higher level, so I'll let them read maybe an easier one, or they'll have readers to develop their reading skills. But for the most part, our school books, I'm reading out loud to them, and then they tell it back to me. So we read one chapter, they tell it back to me. We wait a week to pick this book up again, and then we read, they might tell me back what was happening in the book. Oh yeah, the last time we read, remember what was going on? If they don't remember, I'll tell them. And then we read another chapter and they tell it back to me. And so this is hard for a lot of people who are new to the Charlotte Mason approach, because they think, well, why can't we just read from start to finish one book and then go to the next book? But part of what Charlotte Mason was trying to do with students is develop the memory. So when you read a chapter and then wait a week, you are holding that in your brain, and it's a skill. Also, it allows the children time to really think about and digest the material. So if you rush through a book really quickly and then set it aside, you don't need to continue thinking about it. But if you read one chapter and think about it all week, then you're putting it in a part of your brain where you're continuing to process it and make connections with other books you're reading. I can't tell you how many times I'll be talking with a friend, and then all of a sudden, oh, this reminds me of what I was reading in a book earlier this week. Or I read part of one book and skip to the next one, and oh, there's a connection between Dante and Ivanhoe. I wouldn't have made that connection necessarily unless I was reading them side by side. So it does take a little bit of getting used to and developing, but it's a skill that you and your children can develop in growing your memory. So look into narration more and the Charlotte Mason approach to that, but I actually wanted to kind of dig in to the specific books that we're reading just for the fun of it, and so you can see some of the titles, because they're really wonderful books. So that's the other thing. In school, we are reading excellent books. So we're not just reading any book, kind of the best. And then the benefit is my kids get all of these authors are their teachers. I don't have to be the wealth of all knowledge. I don't have to know about everything and every subject and every date. They're getting it from an author who really loves that subject that they wrote about and is an expert in it. And then we can just enjoy it together and say our narrations to each other together. Guess what I read? Look at this connection I made. So let's start with, I didn't even grab all my kids' books, but these are pretty much the books that I'm reading with my first grader. So, and like I said, these are Ambleside Online reading lists for the most part. So she is reading, oh no, I apologize, this is my third grader's list. My first grader is reading Aesop's Fables. Fables are delightful in the younger levels. The Blue Fairy Book. I love fairy tales, and I just am saddened when I hear that kids aren't hearing fairy tales, knowing fairy tales, but yay, in first grade we're reading these. Again, this of course would be above her reading level in first grade. I'm not looking for what books can a first grader read. I'm looking for the best books, fables and fairy tales. I read them to her, I get to enjoy them, she tells them back to me. She's reading Viking Tales, the Burgess Bird book, so we're learning all about the birds. This is our science, but it's also a very delightful story. Parables from Nature. This isn't on the Ambleside list, but we're reading Curious George Learns the Alphabet because we needed a little extra help in learning phonics, and so this was a fun way. She really enjoys it and doesn't mind pulling it out over and over again to learn about the letters and the sounds they make. She's reading 50 Famous Stories, Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. This one was also delightful and a favorite. James Herriot's Treasury for Children. We actually finished this yesterday, and I really wanted to share because I thought it was beautiful. All of my children have loved this book. You know, we all have favorites, and every time I pull this out, my sixth grader and my third grader say, "Oh, don't read it without me," and they run over and jump on the couch and cuddle because this is just a favorite. And this version has delightful illustrations, and they're all about animals, so of course my first grader loves it. And I've read it with all four children, and we finished it yesterday. And my sixth grader and my third grader both went, "Oh, we won't get to read this again." They had really enjoyed knowing it was coming for Isaac. He would get a chance to read it, and then Elsie would get a chance to read it, and they'd get to hear it again. And so this is what this type of education does for a family. We have friends in these books, and we learn to love them and are excited to see them again and meet them again. And I hope they'll revisit it many times, and I'm sure we'll pull it out and read it for fun. But it's just delightful that they remember back to first grade. They remember the books that we read, and they love them. So that was a special treat. This was another copy of Burgess Bird book, but we only are reading one of them. And the Delaires George Washington. Delaires are a married couple who wrote a whole bunch of books about history that we have loved every one of their books. My third grader, again, I say he is reading, but I am reading them to him still. He reads on his own separately, but the school books I read out loud and he narrates. And when my children narrate, sometimes they simply verbally tell me back the story with as many details as they can. Sometimes I have them write on a piece of paper, draw pictures from the story, especially in the beginning when they're learning narrations. It helps them to have a picture that they can refer back to instead of when I say, "Okay, tell me back this chapter," and they go, "I don't know." I'll say, "Well, tell me what's in your picture. What did you draw about?" So, and it gives them something to do physically while I'm reading, so it helps keep them focused and attentive. We also have done this with Legos. They've made scenes on Minecraft for me as part of their narrations. We often act out what happened in the chapter, and I love that because I think getting up and moving, especially for kinesthetic learners, but any learner, it keeps those in their head a lot better because all their senses are engaged. They're listening, they're seeing, they're hearing, they're remembering. It's wonderful. Okay, third grade. Isaac is reading American Tall Tales and Story of the World. That one's not on this specific one isn't on the Ambleside list, but we're in a homeschool group and they're reading through that. So actually we do that as a family. The Pilgrim Story, Secret of the Woods, Our Island Story, which is about the history of England, A Child's History of the World, This Country of Ours. So he's getting a lot of American history this year, which ties in with the American folktales, which is lovely, and Trial and Triumph, which is about martyrs. And so those are my third graders' reads. I didn't pull out the older two children's, but we just, again, it seems kind of daunting and overwhelming, but we have all of these on a bookshelf, and so anytime it's time for our reading, and we do about 2 a day, then they know which books are theirs, and they run and grab. I'll say, okay, time for Tall Tales, and pretty quickly they know which book that is, and then it goes back on the shelf so we don't lose them. Then as a family, we have a few reads, and some of these are together in school in the morning, and some of them we read before bed. So actually my mom is reading More Stories from Grandma's Attic. This is a delightful book. It's a sequel to Grandma's Attic, and they love hearing it from Grandma. I'm reading, sometimes I read Tales from Shakespeare to the whole family. These are the plays, but they're put in a shorter, kid-friendly narrative by Charles and Mary Lamb, who are brother and sister. They're interesting to read about as well. But actually, I've been switching more for the older kids and reading actually the complete Shakespeare plays with them. I love Shakespeare, and these ones we act out a lot. Again, it's a little higher level reading, so having me read it to them, they understand it, but then when they act it out, I'll be doing basically the narrating for them. So if they didn't catch every word, they aren't familiar with Shakespeare's language yet, it's okay, because they get enough of the gist and they act it out, and it's very fun. I love that part of our homeschooling. We're reading Pinocchio. Honestly, this is one we've been reading for a few years, but just like I will read a book and then maybe leave it for a while and not come back to it, this has kind of been one of those that, oh yeah, we need to get back to that. We're reading Home Geography together, and Anne White's The Plutarch Project. She does an excellent job. We were just reading Plutarch straight, and that was fine, but a lot went over our heads, so she has some extra help with vocabulary and historical context. That's wonderful. Next, I wanted to show you my books, because I think it's important that moms are educating themselves and practicing what we're doing with our children. So obviously I'm getting a lot of reading, and that's lovely and wonderful and fine for a lot of your education to be coming with your children's, but also I'm just like to read, and I like the kids to see me reading, but it does take me a long time to get through books, because of course homeschool moms don't have a lot of time, but I do prioritize it, and I will just read at least 1 chapter a day, and I have some set times throughout the day to do that, and so I'm slowly making it through my stack of books. And so I'm reading the Divine Comedy Book 2, Purgatory, with a group of lovely ladies, so that's keeping me accountable, and I do need some extra help with that, because that's a hard read. My oldest, had to read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations this year, so I thought, well, I should read that too. I've never read it, so I'm slowly making my way through that. The Gulag Archipelago is all about the gulags in Soviet, the USSR. It is a hard read, just emotionally difficult to read, and so I've been working on this for about 5 years. But I am not giving up, and I slowly read a chapter here and there when I can stomach it, and I'm learning about that time in history. I just started Ivanhoe with the book club, and you'll see in each of these books, of course, I just use sticky notes as bookmarks, since we also dog ear our books, some of them, not the beautiful ones, but I am that type of person. I write in all my books and dog ear them, and I'm very mean to them. I'm so sorry, those of you who don't think that's okay. But also sticky notes help a lot when we're just reading 1 chapter at a time, so they're full of bookmarks. We're here and moving along, and I don't have to find a bookmark. I'm reading Rembrandt is in the Wind, is a fun one about beauty and art. I just finished Norms and Nobility, which is all about classical education, and this was a little more expensive, so it was a treat. My husband bought this for me for Christmas, because it's been on my list for quite a while, but goes into a classical paideia education, which was really interesting. I'm reading The Dyslexic Advantage, and ADHD is awesome. I often will throw in some nonfiction books, which are just interesting, and then we are finding out that we have a lot of neurodivergence in our family, so that is why I'm tackling those subjects. But it's always helpful to know, especially if you're teaching other kids, even if it's not in your family. I'm reading through Mother Culture and Basic Economics. That one is a monster, but it's actually not difficult read, so it's very interesting to branch out into a different subject that I also was less familiar with. So this is why we have stacks and stacks and stacks of books in our home and how we approach education. I hope you'll consider it. I know when people hear it for the first time, it sounds just very different. It sounds, why wouldn't you just read a book from start to finish? But there is a rationale behind it, and it makes for interesting conversations, making interesting connections, and you wouldn't believe just a chapter or two a day, you get through a lot of books by the end of the year. So I'd love to hear what you're reading or your thoughts on how to include more literature in your homeschool. Obviously there's a lot of literature, but nonfiction as well.